Wait, the White Sox got a new manager? What was wrong?
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever the hell it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And if you're watching us on the YouTubes, you will see that I am not alone today. We have a very special crossover for the first time on the Locked On MLB show. And I'm crossing over to the Locked On White Sox show. It's the host of Locked On White Sox, Todd Welter. How you doing, buddy?
I'm actually doing great now after the news of the Chicago White Sox getting rid of Pedro Grifol.
Yeah. Wow. It was, if you're listening to Locked On A's, and I know I do, we talked a little bit on the show the other day of the fact that the White Sox had a 2-0 lead. They had the pitcher, I can't remember his name. I mean, he's pitched.
Davis Martin.
Thank you. Davis Martin's pitched like 10 more games than me. And yes, he is coming off of Tommy John surgery, but at the same time, he had not yet thrown 90 pitches. It was throwing a masterpiece, and at least have him come out there, at least let up a base runner. You know, the White Sox were on the verge of going cross country or going back to Chicago, and they could have gone back to Chicago on the high of winning a series before facing the Cubbies, but that didn't happen. But I hope Pedro Grifol didn't leave a lot of comps to the Cubs-White Sox game, because we both woke up this morning, and what did we find out, Todd?
Pedro Grifol was finally fired. It only took the White Sox losing 22 of their past 23 games for him to get fired. Basically, I think the embarrassment is what finally authorized, got the owner to authorize firing Pedro Grifol, because he was not getting a lot of endorsements from general manager Chris Getz the past couple of weeks. And it just looked like it was going to be Jerry Reinsdorf that would have to make the call. They actually had a meeting with each other, all three, last Thursday, and decided he could go out to Minnesota for the road trip. And that's where the White Sox just got crushed in that series. And then they go out to Oakland and they lose 2 of 3. So no more Pedro Grifol.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say something from an outsider's point of view, and you can correct me any way you want. I'm just telling. I mean, I cannot claim to be a White Sox fan. That being said, I have a very soft spot in my heart for the White Sox. I like, as I said, I like the fact that they won the World Series first of the Chicago teams. I don't know why. They always seem to be getting the short end of the stick in terms of, notice of Chicago teams, and even the pain of waiting a long time for a championship seemed to be borderline ignored, and I always found it to be a little strange. But it strikes me as, you remember the White Sox went on a decent run at the end of June. They had a 3-game win streak. They won a couple of games, but then after the 5th of July, let's just go over this, shall we? After July 5. The White Sox have played 27 games and have lost 25 of them. I think a team of Cub Scouts against the Major Leagues could squeeze 2 wins out of 27. That's unbelievable. That's playing sub-0.75 baseball. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around losing 25 out of 27 games. And maybe that's contributed But I guess it's a situation where it's like it wasn't all Pedro's fault. But that being said, something had to be done. Something had to say, all right, we aren't, it's one thing to go on a bad stretch. In that same stretch, Seattle went 10-15. That's a bad stretch. Okay. 2-25. I mean, that's unreal.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a guest on 2 days ago, Jordan Lazowski from Sox on 35th, and he was telling me, we were talking about the magnitude. Like, you can't even run into a pitcher having not his best stuff. You can't run into a lineup that just didn't have it that day. That did not happen, and that was one of the reasons why I think Pedro finally got fired. Was in a lot of the cases, as Chris Getz was mentioning his press conference today, they were starting to become less and less competitive in a lot of these losses.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the year, they were in a lot of these games, they were just maybe shooting themselves in the foot, and they did that. They shot themselves in the foot a few times. Their bullpen blew some leads, clearly, but a lot of it was they just were not competitive at all during this stretch, where it took, was it Ross Stripling or whatever to finally, they ran into the perfect day. And even then, they could have given it up. It took them 5 innings to finally score some runs in their last win. It's just been where they can't hit, they can't field, and their bullpen is absolutely atrocious. The only bright spot they have is their starting pitching, and even then, Chris Flexen still goes out there and he can get lit up a lot. Kai Bush has been replacing Drew Thorpe, who went on the IL. And he didn't have command. And then you're right. The management of the bullpen with Pedro Grifol was just absolutely atrocious. They had a chance to actually stop the losing streak. I think it was last Tuesday. Jonathan Cannon, he threw a gem. And what does he do? What does Pedro do? He brings out Fraser Ellard, who's making his big league debut with a 1-run lead in a high leverage situation.
Kansas City, right? It was
his
case. Yeah.
And I get Ellard's got this should be an evaluation period, but that's not the situation to put a guy making his big league debut in that high of a situation. Maybe a few more days later you put him in, like maybe yesterday instead of Touki Toussaint.
Yeah, I mean, since the 24th of July, they lost 10-2, 2-1, 10-0, 6-3, 6-3, 8-5, 10-3, 10-2, 6-2, 13-7, 5-1. Then they won 5-1, and then Toussaint lost the game yesterday afternoon in Oakland. And I mean, it's the classic, what would firing him actually accomplish? Well, it will accomplish two things. First of all, if you see the house is on fire and someone's method of putting the fire out isn't perfect, you may want to get someone else, even if you don't have the perfect candidate right away. Sometimes it's like things are going badly and you're the one holding the Zippo lighter. All right. Maybe we take it away from you for a little bit. Because it can't possibly, and you're right, there's some of those games are just non-competitive. And I remember Anthony Young of the Mets went on a massive losing streak in the beginning of the 1990s as a pitcher for the Mets. But he was in those games, and it was the thing that made it harder to watch when he kept losing these games, because you saw he was, he would let up, he would be pitching, trying his hardest. And I've seen teams go on losing streaks. So the A's went on a losing streak last year where they were just snake bitten. It was so many games that got away. These games are over soon, with the exception of that KC game and yesterday. I mean, they just seem overmatched. And at some point, you got to be able to say, all right, we acknowledge that there's something wrong, which is what I think today's movement is. Like, okay, losing 25 out of 27 is not acceptable.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, it took to that point because the owner has a very high threshold for embarrassment for them to finally hold Pedro Grifol acceptable. Because the only thing, and I wrote this on, I run the fan site at Southside Showdown site, is, the best time they should have fired him was when they started 3-22. And they didn't. And then they set the franchise record for consecutive losses in a season when they lost 14 in a row in early May or late May, early June. And the White Sox have been around since 1900, and they've never lost that many games. And then they go on this stretch where they not only set the record, they almost break the MLB record for most losses in the modern era. I mean, that's how crazy it is. They were one loss away from setting the AL record. So it did take them a little bit longer to finally hold some accountability. And that is the one thing that this organization has lacked is accountability, because the owner is just so loyal to guys. But at least they finally said, okay, this can't go on anymore. Yeah, you're right. The house is on fire, and it's because this guy keeps lighting it on fire. We got to take that match away from him.
Well, when we come back, I want to do a little bit of an autopsy, because this collapse of the White Sox is, let's face it, really strange. All right, let's hear a little bit from our friends over at GameTime. Hey, you know what GameTime is. I know what GameTime is. It's the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. And I've been going to a lot of games this year. I've been to games in several different stadiums. And you know what? I know where I like to sit. I know how I like to sit. I know what sections I like to sit. And I use GameTime. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. And the prices of the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, viewed from the seats, and the lowest price guaranteed. GameTime does the guesswork out of buying your tickets. Now, Toddy, I don't know where you like to sit. I know where I like to sit. Like, for example, at the Oakland Coliseum, I don't like to sit ground level. I don't like to sit in the nosebleeds. I like the middle section. I like to be a little higher up, but not too high up. I like to be behind home plate, but a little bit up the first base line. That's my favorite vantage point of the game. Do you have a favorite part of the stadium you like to sit in?
Always third baseline. When my dad took me to Comiskey Park, and especially Old Comiskey Park, we had season tickets right on the third baseline. Also, when I go to Miller Park, or now American Family Field, because I live by there, you always want to be on the third baseline because it's always in the shade.
Well, here's the deal. You always know where you want to sit. So get the zone deals. You can choose a section, and GameTime can choose the seats and get you the best deals. And last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% buying last-minute for sports, and also for concerts, comedy, theater, all sorts of things. And you get the seat views, a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. The purchase covers the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. They tend to. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest prices. Do you know what they are? They're guaranteed. Hey, this is a reminder that Locked On has created the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel for your sports needs. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's available on the YouTubes, and it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV, on the free Amazon Fire TV app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is indeed your team every day. Crossover here of Locked On MLB and Locked On White Sox. Hey, Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox. I have to admit, as an outsider, this collapse of the White Sox is absolutely bizarre to me. I mentioned this the other day, but roughly around Labor Day of 2022, the White Sox were a game and a half out of first place, trying to win their second straight division title, and go to the third straight trip to the playoffs, counting the COVID year. Since then, they've played 300 ball, and it looked like they had created a team with good young players, with 2 MVP candidates, with good complementary players, and in a division where there wasn't a powerhouse. It looked like they were going to win the division for the next 3 or 4 years, and they had signed a lot of them long-term. To paraphrase Steve McQueen in the film The Sand Pebbles, what the hell happened?
Where do you want to start? Let's just start with the first thing right off the bat, injuries. Tim Anderson was basically the pillar, the hashtag changed the game. Mm-hmm. Hurts his knee. He's never been the same. He also had some personal issues, some reported extramarital issues that kind of messed with him there. Luis Robert Jr., he missed time. Eloy Jimenez spends more time in the tub than he does at the plate. You had just guys underperforming. Andrew Vaughn has been nothing more than a replacement player, and he was supposed to be a guy that they were counting on to be, take the mantle from Jose Abreu, who took the mantle from Paul Konerko, who took the mantle from Frank Thomas, first base DH, kind of an iconic position with the White Sox. Yeah. The bullpen, they never got, I'll get to the bullpen actually a second. They never got second base or right field right. They've been trying to replace Ray Durham since he was traded to the A's in 2002.
Yeah.
And they've been trying to replace Jermaine Dye since he retired in 2009. What happened was ownership placed limited financial resources on the team, basically a self-imposed salary cap. So they were never able to address them not producing a second baseman or a right fielder. So that was another issue. And what they did do was they put a lot of their money, then the limited resources, into the bullpen. And then the bullpen started to falter and not, come together. So there wasn't a chance for them to make a lot of upgrades. And then again, last year when Pedro came in, and he even admitted one of the biggest mistakes he made was he kind of was hands off, and the clubhouse got very, very toxic. Huge reports. I think it was Keenan Middleton. He had that report, ESPN's Jesse Rogers saying, basically it was just an absolute clown show. So that's kind of how things disintegrated. And then, they fire Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams because they basically dismantled the team in the most dysfunctional way possible. Kenny Williams literally traded Jake Berger right from under Rick Hahn's nose, the GM. Like, they were just never on the same page. And then finally, the system could not produce, what you like to call those reinforcement prospects. A lot of the guys came up at the same time, but they just could not, grab extra guys or develop extra guys to make trades to solve second base or right field. And then finally, they didn't want to extend, for example, Lucas Giolito, so they traded him. They don't want to extend Dylan Cease, so they traded him. So that's hopefully an autopsy in a nutshell.
It happened so fast. I mean, to me, they went from, I know in 2021, when they won the division pretty handily. Now, I was adamant against the hiring of La Russa when they did. Not that I thought that Rick Renteria was the second coming of Earl Weaver, but I felt that if you had made a Venn diagram of who the worst person or the worst qualities of a manager for that particular White Sox team, in the middle of that Venn diagram would be the name Tony La Russa, who I just felt like that team needed a younger manager to sort of let them find their groove. But to La Russa's credit, they won the division and they won it pretty handily. Yes, it was a pretty weak division, but they were a good team in 2021. There's no getting around the fact they were a talented team that year that were matched up with the worst possible matchup with that Houston team going in. I mean, I felt if Chicago had faced Tampa or Boston or New York, one of those other teams, I think they would have beaten them. I think Houston was just the worst matchup for them. And I think they did squeeze a win out, which was cool. But I just thought, like, okay, I thought of it as kind of like, all right, that's the learning year. And then what happened the next year? Grifol came in from a Royals organization that seemed to be the model, what they did in the mid-2010s, of the model of how to take advantage of a window of opportunity when the Royals went to the back-to-back World Series, winning it in 2015. And to be fair, I was for the move. I thought, like, okay, if we're going to bring in someone, go the opposite of La Russa, bring in a young person, bring in someone who will, maybe spark the team. And almost right away, he seemed overwhelmed. He seemed like I've been a substitute teacher before. Okay. He looked like a substitute teacher. He looked like the teacher that got taken advantage and could get pranked and everything like that. And oh my God, that team, just from a distance, it just looked like the Lord of the Flies.
Yeah. And the problem is, and he came into a veteran team that had also won. And he tried to, one of the things that he was very attracted to the White Sox was he knew what was wrong with them. He knew that they didn't hustle. That's another thing on the autopsy. They didn't hustle. They didn't do a lot of fundamental things. So that's kind of how he won the interview. But then he really had no plan to execute it. And it's kind of hard to tell guys like, hey, I watch you guys from the other side. You guys don't take the extra base. You guys don't do this. You don't do that. So a bunch of veterans who are like, look, my resume speaks for itself. Like, Yasmani Grandal, for all his warts, is an accomplished baseball player. So it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to go to Yasmani Grandal and say, you are slow as you know what. You're terrible throwing out guys on, to second. You don't do this, you don't do that. It's kind of hard to get his buy-in. And that was the problem. So if you hired Pedro Grifol saying, I know what's wrong with everything, what they probably should have done is they probably should have scrapped everything last year instead of this year, which is basically what they did. They just scrapped everything. They traded Cease away. They probably should have gone a full-on rebuild because, hindsight being 2020, that contention window slammed absolutely, shut. And a lot of it was not Pedro Grifol's fault last year. This year, it's his fault.
Right.
Some of it, not all of it. I'd give him 25 to 50%.
Who do you want in there? And I'm not going to ask you to say Ozzy.
Well, it's not going to be Ozzy. Chris Getz has made it abundantly clear. It's not even going to be Grady Sizemore, who's the interim manager.
Yeah.
He's only going to be the manager through the season, and then I'm sure they're going to probably make him a bench coach, kind of, eventually. They talk about Skip Schumacher. I don't think that's going to happen because the Sox have never won a bidding war. I heard Josh Gibbons, former Toronto manager. He was Chris Getz's former manager before Getz was run out of baseball. I think he would be a nice guy to just, hey, you got to wear these losses and teach these guys how to play baseball right. So I'd go, I think he's an attractive guy. And I'd also look at maybe anybody from the Arizona Diamondbacks because their assistant GM came from there. And that was kind of the model that they're trying to do this year, was try to play like the Diamondbacks.
And I mean, I was surprised the interim manager wasn't Montoyo because he had managerial experience. And a lot of times they'll throw in someone who is like, it's your gig for the rest of the year. You've already done this before.
And they fired him.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, geez, this is how I find this out. Oh, yeah. He was fired as well. Okay. This is how fresh the news is. All I heard was that Grifol was fired and Grady Sizemore, who would fit in with this White Sox team because he's enormously talented and always injured. So he would have fit right in with the 2024 Chicago White Sox. Sizemore was, if those of you don't remember, he was a remarkable player, stolen from the Expos by Cleveland in the late 2000s in the Bartolo Colon trade, but just couldn't stay healthy. When he was healthy, he was a legit MVP candidate, or at least a peripheral MVP candidate. But the guy couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah,
and it broke your heart. It was that Jacoby Ellsbury syndrome.
Yeah, and he's thought of to be a very bright mind. He took that $15 an hour internship with the Diamondbacks last year. He was that was his title, coach, this year. I think they just had him in the press box on that. So I think they view him as a future manager and they want to give him some experience and then probably move him to bench coach. But you're right, he was the modern day version, or the yesteryear version, of Eloy Jimenez.
Right. Well, and fans of Locked On MLB, get your shots out. Do a shot, because my fans always do a shot when I bring these people up. But anybody who was Bruce Bochy's lieutenant, all Bruce Bochy ever did was win championships. And I've always said I never understood why Hensley Mullins never got a job. I never understood why Roberto Kelly didn't get a job. They were on the coaching staff of multiple World Series title teams. They have baseball IQs off the charts. Hensley Mullins speaks more languages than C-3PO. It's just sort of it all makes sense to me. But what do I know? We'll see what friend. What if they get La Russa again?
Oh God, no. I think if Jerry Reinsdorf, I'll throw a name out here that you might laugh at, but another guy that if Jerry Reinsdorf got involved would want, Jim Leland. He always wanted to hire Jim Leland as his manager.
Well, he's already in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. What about Joe Girardi? He's a Chicago guy.
I think Chris Getz made it very clear in his press conference that managers wearing a uniform right now. So I think he wants somebody that's current. So a manager that is currently managing or an assistant coach. There was issues with Joe Girardi. I know, probably embracing the analytics, if I recall, when he was in Philly and that. So I don't know they want to go that way. Although he could teach them how to play baseball the right way, because they just need somebody to teach the game, to say, take the extra base, hustle, those types of things.
All right. When we come back, I have some big questions to ask of the overall experience of the Chicago White Sox right now. All right. Let's hear from our friends over at Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades. Supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skill trade can get a competitive edge by joining Supplyhouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from the free membership at Supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere in just a few clicks at Supplyhouse.com. Sing that song with me. Supplyhouse.com. Now, I'm in a bad, weird situation right now. I'm supposed to read copy telling you to come listen to my show, Locked On MLB, but you're already doing that. So if you like what I'm doing here, then you'll really like Locked On A's, which I'm also doing 5 days a week. And you can listen to me speak more specifically about the A's in their strange year where they are off to Sacramento at the end of the year, where they'll be playing on the surface of the sun. Meanwhile, my buddy here, Todd, tell us about your show, Locked On White Sox.
You can hear me Monday through Friday talking White Sox baseball about the worst team in baseball. But you know what? I'm still a diehard fan. For some reason, I'll always love this team. So, yeah, Monday through Friday.
And your fandom is bringing me directly to finding a link between the A's and the White Sox right now. And it isn't just because they somehow played each other in the playoffs as recently as 2020. The A's obviously were in a situation where their ballpark was falling apart. The ownership wouldn't put money into it. They were longing to be elsewhere. And the situation they were put in with the attendance, they were starting to blame the fans while slashing payroll and everything like that, and flirting with other cities. Does that sound familiar to you as a White Sox fan? And let me ask you, is this A's 2.0, and are the White Sox basically playing footsie with the city of Nashville right now?
So, yeah, in a lot of ways, it does sound like A's 2.0 in terms of Jerry Reinsdorf blaming the community of Bridgeport for not supporting the White Sox. Even though the White Sox fans, we're not Cubs fans in a lot of ways, and nothing against the Cubs fans, just we're not going to go pay money to go watch a bad product. We demand a better product. So that's when we're going to go out. And when we do go out, we do support the team, and the team does well.
Yeah.
Jerry can complain that he's never drawn 3 million fans, but not a lot of teams do draw 3 million fans. That's the thing that he's missed. In terms of moving to Nashville, I would say I would still put it at it's a possibility, but it's not something that would happen. What it is kind of happening, local radio host Dan Bernstein on 670 The Score. I know not a lot of people like him, but he's got a lot of insights. He's basically saying it's like the end of an empire. Jerry is holding on to this team because it's his vanity project, Jerry Reinsdorf. But once he passes away, because he's almost 90, his heirs have been instructed to sell the team unless they do build a new stadium. If they do, then they might hold on to it. But otherwise, the Bulls is the cash cow of his family. That's where they're staying. So what is going to happen is a new owner is going to buy it. And could it be somebody from Nashville? Sure. But from what I hear, Nashville does not want a team relocated. They want an expansion team if they're going to get it. And also, in terms of public money, their mayor does not want to commit any public money. So that's where the White Sox are in limbo. What I could see happening is a new owner comes in, he looks at it and says, I don't mind sharing Chicago, just like the Mets owner, Steve Cohen didn't mind sharing New York. The Angels share Los Angeles. I could see him doing that and then either using their own money to build a stadium. Or
I would say, as someone who lived in Los Angeles County for a long time, the Angels are not Los Angeles. Right. The Angels are Orange County, which is very different from Los Angeles. But I digress. I digress.
They're trying to share that. But I could see them doing that, and then I could see one of two things. Hopefully the owner puts up more of his own money to where the state of Illinois says, fine, we'll build you that, we'll contribute it. Or the owner says, you know what, I'll just develop around guaranteed rate. There's plenty of land to still develop. There's a lot of
Yeah.
parking lots and people love to tailgate, but you know what? If you want the White Sox to spend some money, let them make money.
Right.
Let them create Gallagher way for the White Sox. Let them create Comiskeyville. So that's why I'm not. It's a possibility. That's all I'll say.
Right. Well, as someone I've read many of I've read many books about the what ifs in baseball history and how close we were to seeing the Seattle White Sox and how close we were to seeing the Tampa Bay White Sox. I am very, very glad the White Sox did not win their championship in Tropicana Field. It was so. I mean, it was a done deal. They were going to Florida in the night. That's why they built the freaking stadium was for the White Sox. I for one hope they do stay. And it's not just because I'm the host of Locked On A's. The team that gets kind of forgotten the way the A's do here, the way the Angels, I'll throw the Angels as a Southern California team, even though they're decidedly not LA, and the way the Mets do. I always have a soft spot in my heart for those teams because those are not the big, sexy franchises. And so there, the fans have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I think chips on shoulders are fun. Yep. And you're right. I think here's the one thing I'll push back a tiny bit, however. Sure. Yes, Las Vegas doesn't want the A's. They want an expansion team. Nashville wants an expansion team. I guarantee you Charlotte wants an expansion team. I guarantee you if a team goes to Portland or a team goes to Montreal, everyone wants an expansion team. But they're not going to expand by 5 teams. Mm-hmm. And so at one point they will have to get someone's sloppy seconds. And if something, heaven forbid, happens to Mr. Reinsdorf and they put him up for sale, and that desire to have a expansion team will go by the wayside if a team can be brought. And I do find it intriguing that they've been playing footsie with Nashville, but they also have connections with Charlotte, the White Sox. But I think in the end, I think they're going to stay in Chicago. I just think that there will be the lure to make Chicago money and someone coming in to buy the team saying, I'm going to make Chicago money. I'm not going to make freaking Nashville money. I think that will win out in the end. But maybe that's just me being hopeful. I thought the A's were going to stay here too. So what are you going to do?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the Sox again have a little bit more of options too. That they've tossed out other plots of land, and I know you said they tossed out a lot of plots of land for Oakland, but none of that. The Sox don't need a new stadium. Their stadium is perfectly fine. It's just that they want to have a more modern stadium. They want to be able to develop the area, and Bridgeport has always been stereotyped as this non-safe place, and it's safe. Trust me.
Yeah, I went there a few years ago. It's fine.
Yeah, you wear a White Sox hat around that neighborhood. I mean, yeah, if you go way, to certain areas, you're not in great neighborhoods, but the security's fine. I've been in the neighborhood plenty of times. You wear a White Sox hat, you are perfectly fine.
You're telling me, the guy who does Locked On A's, you're telling me about it's here if you go a little bit too far in certain directions, maybe not so much. Yeah, the same can be said about Oakland. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb.
Yeah, that's why I think Oakland and the Sox are kindred spirits in terms of that, because they've had the chip on their shoulders, they've had the connections,
and they had Frank Thomas.
Yeah, that too, and Frank Thomas should have won the MVP in 2000. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and Frank Thomas, if they gave out Division Series MVPs, would have been the Division Series MVP for the A's in 2006 because he basically homered. His homers against the Twins sent the A's to the ALCS. So there you go. Little something to keep and share with your loved ones around the breakfast nook. Okay, we're running long here. Todd, tell people where they can follow your show.
They can follow me at Locked On White Sox on YouTube, and you can follow me at Locked On Sox on Twitter and at Todd J. Dub.
And you can follow me whether you're watching at Locked On MLB or on Locked On A's. Both of them are on YouTube. You can follow me either way. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Talking about the White Sox, who said, you know what? Maybe 25 out of 27 is enough. He's Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox. I'm your pal Sully from Locked On MLB and Locked On A's. I messed up my sign-off, but you know what? Let's call it a show anyway.